Muito alto? Isto é para dar o kick, estás a ver? É para me... Tenho de fazer com os pés, então. Olá pessoal, sejam bem-vindos a mais um podcast irreverente. Hoje vamos ter um grande convidado aqui na nossa entrevista, Yaron Brook. Ele é israelita, mas vive agora em Porto Rico, mas já foi para os Estados Unidos há muitos anos e está à frente do Instituto Ayn Rand, é um objetivista, enfim, vão perceber bem o que é que isto significa, mas é alguém que tem uma posição filosófica bastante profunda e com quem se, concordando numas coisas, discordando noutras, podemos aprender. Antes disso, hoje infelizmente não temos a nossa voz off. O Zé foi operado ao pé ontem. As melhoras é que fiques bem, rapidamente possas recuperar e estar aqui connosco. E para o tema do dia, ou enfim, polémica do dia, eu hoje queria-vos falar sobre a reforma do Estado, a reforma administrativa do Estado. Tem sido um grande tema. O Governo criou até um ministério só para o fazer e, na verdade, a reforma do Estado é uma tarefa hercúlea pela forma como o próprio Estado funciona. Eu vou-vos contar aqui algumas histórias reais que eu próprio presenciei, ou que de alguma forma eu sei que aconteceram, foram de pessoas próximas, e quem estiver a assistir a isto, se for funcionário público, trabalhar na administração pública, de certeza que também tem histórias para contar. Portanto, eu aproveito para vos desafiar a entrarem em contacto e partilharem as vossas próprias histórias, que no fundo retratam um bocadinho como funciona a administração pública e porque é que a sua reforma vai ser um desafio tão grande, que deve ser feita, tem que ser feita, mas que vai ser um desafio grande. A primeira história que vou partilhar aqui convosco aconteceu com uma pessoa que é próxima, que no fundo foi nomeado para um cargo de subdiretor-geral numa instituição do Estado, não interessa a área, mas enfim, estamos a falar de um alto quadro da administração pública, subdiretor-geral. E na primeira semana ele estava ao trabalho e houve uma técnica, uma administrativa, que foi ter com ele, levou-lhe um papelzinho e pediu-lhe para ele assinar o papel, porque era necessário comprar papel higiênico para aquele piso. Ele olhou para aquilo e achou que era brincadeira, que era uma praxe, por ele ser recente ali, estava ali há menos de uma semana, e ele não queria imaginar que o subdiretor-geral tinha de autorizar a compra de papel higiênico para aquele piso. Ora, na semana seguinte, a mesma senhora chegou lá, visivelmente não incomodada, mas atrapalhada, porque o papel ainda não estava assinado, a dizer, Sr. Doutor, peço imensa desculpa, mas tem mesmo de assinar o papel, é que senão nós não vamos ter papel higiênico aqui nas nossas casas de banho. E ele aí percebeu, de facto, como é que funciona, como é que é a lógica burocrática da administração pública. Repare-se, foi preciso um alto quadro numa instituição com imensas responsabilidades do Estado, assinar um papel para que fosse possível comprar papel higiênico para as casas de banho. Isto seria cómico se não fosse profundamente trágico, mas infelizmente esta é a realidade do dia-a-dia das instituições. Outras histórias que me ocorrem, que eu próprio presenciei, foi quando estava num projeto, a fazer um projeto de investigação e consultoria num hospital público. Já agora, curiosidade, já trabalhei com muitos hospitais públicos, mas nunca trabalhei com nenhum hospital privado, isto para a malta de esquerda que diz que nós somos uns vendidos ao setor privado, só trabalhei com hospitais públicos. Quando estava num desses projetos num hospital público, estava numa zona à espera, íamos ter uma reunião e assisti a uma técnica superior a levar um saco preto acompanhado de 2 pessoas para uma sala. Como essa sala tinha um vidro semifosco, deu para perceber bem o que é que estava ali a acontecer, e eu vi aquelas pessoas a tirarem bolas daquele saco preto, uma bola preta e uma bola branca. E eu achei que aquilo era uma rifa qualquer para os funcionários do hospital, uma brincadeira, enfim, que se sorteava um prémio qualquer entre eles, e perguntei o que é que estava a passar. E a pessoa que estava lá responde-me, algo surpreendida até com a minha questão, a dizer, não, aquilo era um processo de desempate de um concurso para a aquisição de um fármaco ou de um dispositivo clínico ou de um consumível clínico. No fundo, era a forma como se fazia um desempate. Porquê? Porque os 2 fornecedores apresentaram o mesmo preço, Podíamos entrar aqui numa discussão de porque é que apresentaram o mesmo preço, mas não vamos ter tempo para isso, mas apresentaram o mesmo preço e era necessário um critério de desempate. Como é que aconteceria numa empresa? Bom, a empresa olharia para outros critérios, olharia para a relação que tem com o fornecedor, se é um fornecedor fiável, o tempo de entrega do fornecedor, enfim, outros critérios para além da questão do preço, não é apenas o preço que interessa. No caso da administração pública, como a administração pública se rege pelo Código dos Contratos Públicos, que é uma coisa, enfim, indescritível de burocrática, quando se define demasiados critérios e aquilo afunila demasiado os fornecedores, pode parecer que nós estamos a querer favorecer um fornecedor. E como é óbvio, ninguém se quer pôr a jeito de levar uma multa do Tribunal de Contas ou ser até suspeito de um caso de um caso judicial, obviamente simplifica o processo e usa apenas o preço. E, portanto, há que desempatar pelo preço. E como é que se empata pelo preço? Há quem faça com moeda ao ar, há quem faça com bola preta, bola branca, e, portanto, isto é um hospital, uma entidade que com orçamentos de 200, 300, 400 milhões, no caso estamos a falar de um hospital com um orçamento de 400 milhões, mas isto acontece em quase todos os hospitais públicos, a decidir um processo de desempate para a aquisição de um material, de um consumível clínico de um hospital. E já agora, se chegamos a este processo de desempate, foi porque antes houve um concurso, ou seja, antes houve a necessidade de comprar qualquer coisa nesse hospital. Também isso vale a pena falar sobre isso e dar-vos aqui uma ideia de como é que as coisas funcionam. Isto é no caso de um hospital público, mas qualquer entidade do Estado que dependa do Código dos Contratos Públicos está, de certa forma, condicionado por isto e sujeito a isto, em alguns casos mais complexo, noutros menos complexo, mas anda à volta disto. Portanto, vamos imaginar o caso em que num hospital um médico ou um enfermeiro identifica uma necessidade. É preciso comprar um fármaco, é preciso comprar um consumível, enfim, seja o que for. E ainda não existe nenhum contrato que esteja a dar provisão desse fármaco. Ou seja, não existe ali nenhum contrato com nenhum fornecedor, que se chama o acordo quadro, ou não está disponível na central de compras do Estado, no caso da saúde, dos SPMS. Ou seja, é necessário formular ali um novo contrato, uma adjudicação para se poder comprar então aquele objeto, seja ele qual for. Isto começa, portanto, com a identificação dessa necessidade e depois aquilo vai ter de ir, consoante os montantes, ao diretor de serviço ao Conselho de Administração, que reúne geralmente uma vez por semana, e, portanto, o Conselho de Administração vai analisar aquela necessidade. Depois de ir ao Conselho de Administração, vai ter de ser feita uma consulta ao mercado, a várias entidades, os fornecedores vão apresentar as suas propostas, é constituído um júri que vai ter de se reunir para avaliar essas propostas, depois há um período de reclamação dos fornecedores, depois é necessário perceber se o hospital tem capacidade financeira para assumir aquele compromisso financeiro, se não há nenhuma restrição, e também já agora se juridicamente aquilo cumpre todos os preceitos do Código dos Contratos Públicos. No melhor cenário, este processo todo, desde que alguém identifica a necessidade até que o medicamento pode entrar, ou o consumível pode entrar pelo hospital adentro, pode demorar mais ou menos, geralmente demora 2 a 3 meses, ok? Isto é na melhor das hipóteses. Na pior das hipóteses, em que isto tem de ir ao Tribunal de Contas, e não é difícil ir ao Tribunal de Contas, basta que o valor da adjudicação ceda, de antes eram 300 e tal mil euros, entretanto esse valor foi ligeiramente aumentado depois da pandemia, mas andará à volta disso, e num hospital grande 300 e tal mil euros ou 400 mil euros não é nada, obviamente, porque eles têm de comprar em grandes quantidades, tem de ir ao Tribunal de Contas para ter um visto prévio. Se for ao Tribunal de Contas, estamos a falar de mais um mês. Ok? Portanto, imaginem isto. Imaginem que têm uma empresa e que demoravam 3 a 4 meses a conseguirem comprar fosse o que fosse. Uma resma de papel, um computador, enfim, material que vocês precisam para a vossa atividade. Como é que era possível vocês conseguirem se governar e gerir a vossa empresa desta maneira? Não é. Obviamente, isto gera imensas ineficiências. Ineficiências como, dou-vos aqui alguns exemplos, por exemplo, que como estes processos são muito complexos, os hospitais acabam por ter de comprar grandes quantidades de uma só vez, para evitar, obviamente, entrar constantemente nestes processos. Ora, quando isso acontece, por exemplo, quando se compra uma determinada molécula, um determinado medicamento patenteado numa grande quantidade e depois, passado um mês, ou 2, ou 3, sai um biosimilar, ou seja, um medicamento similar, mas que não está sujeito à patente e que, portanto, custa 1/10 do preço, o hospital ficou agora preso àquela quantidade absurda, àquele estoque absurdo, precisamente porque teve de fazer uma grande encomenda para evitar aqueles processos mais complexos, ou seja, podia ter ali uma oportunidade para estar a poupar dinheiro e não poupa dinheiro. Isto também tem implicações do ponto de vista do número de recursos humanos que é necessário para gerir estes processos todos. Uma vez mais, outro exemplo. no Hospital São João, e atenção, o Hospital São João até é dos hospitais que dentro do sistema público é considerado mais eficiente, dos mais eficientes, mais bem gerido, tem cerca de 70 pessoas, tinha mais de 70 pessoas só a gerir esta parte das compras. Não estamos a falar da distribuição do serviço, da parte logística, transportar as caixinhas de um lado para o outro. Não, estamos a falar apenas de contactar os fornecedores, pedir cotações, fazer notas de encomenda, faturas. Mais de 70 pessoas. O maior grupo privado português, ou um dos maiores da área da saúde, só para fazer aqui um ponto de comparação, com mais de 40 unidades de saúde espalhadas pelo país inteiro, tem menos de 30 pessoas. Portanto, um só hospital tem mais do dobro que o maior grupo privado, que tem mais de 40 instituições espalhadas pelo país inteiro. E perguntam agora vocês, ou afirmam vocês, bom, isso é porque no setor público são só incompetentes e no setor privado eles foram lá buscar uns génios. Não, de todo. No setor público há gente muito competente, é verdade, também existe pessoas encostadas, mas isso há em todo lado, mas há gente muito competente, é simplesmente porque a máquina do Estado é tão pesada que de facto obriga a ter aqueles recursos humanos todos. Aliás, um gestor privado no setor público devido que sobrevivesse muito tempo, porque é de facto necessário uma capacidade de resiliência e de aguentar com estas burocracias e conseguir lidar com estas burocracias que não é para qualquer um. E claro que depois isto gera ineficiências, custa dinheiro e não é fácil de resolver. Portanto, é este o desafio. Quando nós falamos de reforma do Estado, primeiro falamos de onde é que o Estado deve estar e onde é que o Estado não deve estar, e depois, quando olhamos para o Estado, onde é que ele tem que estar, de uma forma ou de outra, nós vamos perceber que a máquina do Estado é uma coisa complexíssima, ultra burocrática, com imensas ineficiências e que vai ser extremamente difícil de reformar. Enfim, ficam aqui algumas dessas situações. Convido-vos novamente a partilharem as vossas que conheçam, enviem-me um e-mail, deixem um comentário aqui no vídeo, porque certamente que quem é funcionário público conhece muitas destas histórias insólitas. Eu teria mais umas quantas para vos contar, mas deixo que sejam vocês a fazê-lo. E para o livro desta semana, até porque o nosso convidado é Yaron Brook, vão rapidamente perceber quem é, de quem se trata, vou recomendar aqui o livro Atlas Shrugged. O Atlas, no fundo, foi o deus grego que foi condenado, já não me recordo se foi por Zeus, mas creio que sim, a carregar o mundo para a sua eternidade, ou carregar o mundo às costas para a sua eternidade, e no fundo representa um pouco aquilo que é a imagem deste livro. O Atlas Shrugged é uma espécie de um romance, mas não romance, tem aqui um conteúdo muito político e filosófico também, que começa com uma questão: quem é John Galt? E depois, passadas 700 páginas, vocês vão descobrir quem é John Galt. Enfim, reflete também aquilo que é uma filosofia chamada objetivismo, que o Yaron Brook vai falar um bocadinho mais sobre o objetivismo, em que é que consiste o objetivismo. E o que eu vos posso dizer é que foi um livro que primeiro me marcou bastante, ajudou a criar aquilo que é a minha consciência política, aquilo que é o meu posicionamento político. Foi um livro que eu demorei algum tempo a digerir. Quando comecei a ler, teve um impacto, e depois esse impacto foi-se ajustando ao longo do tempo, porque de facto tenho uma visão muito particular das coisas, enfim, e daquilo que significa o individualismo e o interesse próprio, e portanto depois tem de ser obviamente digerido. Acho que este é o termo, mas foi um livro que eu, quando comecei a ler, levava-o para todo lado, portanto nunca o largava. É quase como, enfim, usar roupa interior, andar com o telemóvel atrás. Não foi viciante, um grande livro, e sobretudo o discurso de 70 páginas do John Galt, que não vou falar sobre ele, mas que depois vocês terão a oportunidade de ler, ao fim de cerca de 700 páginas de livro, terão a oportunidade de ler o discurso do John Galt, que é um discurso muito impactante, e que aqui alude a valores e a princípios que certamente muitos de vós, mesmo que não o saibam, certamente irão valorizar. E fica a dica para esta semana. Okay, so Yaron, thank you so much for being here today with us. It's quite a pleasure. For those who don't know Yaron Brook, He's an economist. He's the head of Ayn Rand Institute, and he's a scholar as well of objectivism, which is a philosophy that we'll have opportunity to discuss and explain in detail to our viewership. And considering that you're here free of charge, right? Pro bono. At least you haven't shown me the bill. Free of charge, pro bono, gratuitously, for the benefit of us all, Absolutely. For the collective benefit of us all. Absolutely. Thank you very much for your altruism.
Yeah, not altruism. I love this. I enjoy this.
Okay, so it's for your own self-interest.
And I have a huge self-interest in trying to change the world. So if the world becomes a better place, then my life will be better as well. So there's nothing altruistic at all about
being here pro bono.
No suffering here at all. I am I'm not the head of the Ayn Rand Institute. I'm chairman of the board now. I used to be CEO. I retired from that job in 2018, and yeah, and I also have a podcast. So Yaron Brook Show. If you're interested, check it out on YouTube.
Okay, so you do have an interest on being here as well.
Absolutely.
Which is actually something positive. I had that question further ahead, but since we just started discussing it, I'll start there. For those who don't know, who are still getting to know Ayn Rand, she basically, why don't you tell us her story? I mean, she was born Russian, even though she was ethnically Jewish, right? Mm-hmm. And she moved to the U.S. when she was about on her 20s, and she came from the Soviet Union. So she witnessed, first place, what is the impact of socialism, of collectivism, and what happens when you put those terrible ideas in practice, right? In real life.
Absolutely.
What can you tell us more about her?
I mean, she was born in 1905 in St. Petersburg, Russia, to a middle-class family. Her father owned a pharmacy. Right in the big square in St. Petersburg. She witnessed from her home. She witnessed the Russian Revolution. That's where it started. It started in that square in St. Petersburg, and they lived through the Russian Civil War, and then felt kind of what happened when Lenin got to power and took away their pharmacy, took away their apartment. They had to now share it with 3 other families. And she went to university in the Soviet Union. And it was very clear early on. I mean, she was a kind of an individualist. She had very strong opinions. She hated communism.
Sorry, she had those principles already?
Yes.
Or were something that somehow grew within her, witnessing what happened after Lenin took power?
No, she was very much an individualist even before that. I mean, at a very young age, she decided she wanted to be an author. She was very attracted to romantic literature, very young, before communism. She had this view of heroism and the individual as a hero before communism. So I think experience of communism sharpened that, but I don't think she is a product of a rebellion against communism. She was rebelling against communism while it was happening. She already understood. And it was clear that if she stayed, she would die. Right, if she stayed there, because she couldn't keep her mouth shut. Right, she was a
very fierce woman.
Very fierce woman. She had strong beliefs. Yeah. She couldn't tolerate the collectivism all around her. She was going to university, and she wrote a book in the 1930s called "We the Living," which is very much the closest autobiographical book we have of hers about a young woman growing up in the Soviet Union and the kind of life she was living. And if you want to understand what communism is really like, We the Living is a fantastic book and very emotional, very powerful, and kind of what happens to this young woman as she struggles to maintain her sanity in a crazy world. So the idea was she needed to get out, and the question was how to get out of the Soviet Union. And it was a short window in the 1920s, mid to late 20s, where Lenin allowed people to leave for short periods of time. And her excuse was she had studied film, and the idea was she wanted to be a writer for film. And there was a short period of time where he allowed her out, and she was going to go do research about American movie industry. Everybody who knew her knew she would never come back, right? She was gone. She was never coming back. So she left in her early 20s with nothing. She had family members in Chicago who put her up for a few weeks, and she spent some time there. but ultimately she headed towards Los Angeles and Hollywood. And she showed up in Hollywood with nothing. An introductory letter from her cousin in Chicago who owned a movie theater to the Cecil B. DeMille studio. Cecil B. DeMille was the Spielberg of his time, right? The biggest director in Hollywood. And she literally goes there and she hands a letter to the receptionist, and they say, like one among, thousands of young women who want to work in Hollywood. And they say, don't call us, we'll call you, kind of attitude. But as she walks out of...
That's typical of Hollywood, right?
Typical of Hollywood. Yeah. And again, how many young women have gone to Hollywood?
Of course, and ask for the same,
sign for the same thing. But she walks out, and in the driveway outside the studio is a big convertible. And inside the convertible is none other than Cecil B. DeMille himself. This is a true story. This is not, And she was this short Russian woman but these really, you can see it in the picture here. Maybe you can show that picture. These piercing eyes, right? And she's staring at Cecil B. DeMille, and he stops the car and he says, why are you staring? And she tells him, I'm here from Russia, and my dream is to become a writer for films, and this is what I want to do, and I love American movies. And he says, well, if you want to be in the movie industry, get in the car, I'll show you. So she gets in, and he takes her to the back lot of the studio where he's filming The King of Kings, of all things, the story of Jesus Christ, which is a silent movie, but this is a time of silent movies. And he says, here's a pass for a week. Here you go.
Just enjoy.
Go see how the movies are made. And of course, this is the beginning. So she becomes an extra in the movie. You can find her if you look in the crowd scenes in the King of Kings. And she basically takes odds and ends jobs, and she meets her husband on the set of that movie, the person who becomes her husband later. And she gets integrated into the movie business in the United States. This little Russian immigrant to the United States. She at night is writing English and figuring out her English and practicing. And by the time the mid-1930s come around, she's written a play that is performed in Los Angeles and ultimately on Broadway. She's written We the Living, which is published in the United States. And she's written a small novella called Anthem, which she can't find a publisher in the U.S. for, but is published in the United Kingdom, the land of George Orwell, if you will. And there's suggestion that Orwell might have read Anthem before he wrote 84. So she goes from a unknown immigrant to a successful American author. She publishes The Fountainhead, which is, of course, becomes a bestseller. 12 publishers reject it. And the publisher that takes it only prints like 2,000 copies because they don't think it's going to be successful. Becomes a New York Times best-selling book. So by 1945, within 20 years, she's one of the best-selling authors.
J.K. Rowling, I don't want to draw this comparison, but J.K. Rowling also got rejected. I think it was 15 or 16 times.
Yeah.
So that shows the amount of resilience you need to have to carry on, just move on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And she created her career in the U.S. It's interesting because she moved, right? She moved away from a collectivist project or society, right? The Soviet Union.
Sure.
She was all by herself. She was disconnected from the rest of her society, at least where she came from.
Her family all stayed in the Soviet Union.
And that reminds me a lot of what John Galt did, right? Because he moves away. He basically focuses on his specific project, the perpetual motion machine. But drawing the parallel, she's also creating her pieces, her masterwork, right? Her novels. There's some Galtian perspective to it. I was wondering whether if John Galt could have been at least very mildly inspired by her own life experience of moving away and leaving those things behind and starting something on her own, not dependent on anyone, and doing it by all herself.
I think there's a sense of that. Of course, John Galt doesn't do it all alone.
No,
right?
Of course,
because he has two friends. Yeah, I don't want to give the whole plot.
Yeah,
away.
We'll discuss that.
I don't want to give it away the ending of the third part of Atlas Shrugged. But But Gold has two friends that go along with him. She also is not going on strike in a sense. She's leaving the Soviet Union because she knows they're going to kill her. She is not, and she's coming to a place she thinks is free. She's disillusioned with America ultimately, and she realizes America is nowhere near the kind of world that she expected and wanted. And as she's there, the United States is turning away from the freedom she becomes the advocate for, right? So she's coming just into, as we go into the Great Depression, and FDR becomes president, and the United States become more statist and more interventionist and less free. And that's what she fights. She spends her rest of her life trying to save America. She really does view it as America has this amazing promise at its founding, never really lives up to that promise, and is moving dramatically away from that promise. And
the land of the free.
The land of the free, and she is going to try to resurrect, if you will. I think she is the American thinker who most represents the founding fathers in the modern era.
Okay, that's a good way of putting it.
Another way to think about it is Ayn Rand is the first American philosopher.
Okay, that's an interesting.
She's a philosopher of America. She comes maybe from Russia.
Okay.
But she is. But as an immigrant, she understands America better than Americans who are born in America. And I think that's often true.
That's a good point.
That's often true of immigrants in America. Okay. They get what makes America special more than Americans get what makes America special. And while America had a few philosophers before, those philosophers all betray the founding ideas of America. Ayn Rand is the first American philosopher who basically expands on and deepens the American Revolution intellectually.
That's a good point. But before we discuss that further, because that's definitely interesting, I want to step back for those who don't know who Ayn Rand is and what she became kind of famous for. One of the things that she defended staunchly was that idea. That's why I started this podcast with the provocative sentence saying that you were being altruistic, because she staunchly defended the idea of self-interest, of individuals working for their own self-interest, and there's nothing wrong with that. The book she wrote, The Virtues of Selfishness, they basically reproduces this idea, right? That it's okay, it's more than okay, it's a moral principle to work towards whatever benefits, or it is your own self-interest. And there's actually some resemblance to what Adam Smith tells in The Invisible Hand, because he basically says that it doesn't matter the reason why people are doing what they're doing, if it's for profit, motive, for whatever reason, even if they want to get rich. By doing so, they're benefiting us all because they need to add value to society to get money in return, right? So there's something, I think that it stops there. So, right, it's only that they probably share in common. But the question I want to ask is like an applied implication of the self-interest motive.
Sure.
So you probably know, this is like a dilemma I've had in the past. You probably know Mother Teresa of Calcutta, right? So she devoted her whole life basically serving the poor and helping the poor.
Yep.
And the question I ask and I wonder is, wasn't she doing that for her own self-benefit and interest, in the sense that pleased her, that made her happy? Because if I'm happy devoting my life to helping others, is that altruism? Or is that selfishness, in the sense that I'm doing whatever makes me happy and I don't care, even though that benefits the collective, a lot of people?
So have you ever read Mother Teresa's diaries?
No, I haven't, but I've read Virtues of Selfishness.
So if you read Mother Teresa's diaries, you will realize that she was the opposite of happy. She was a miserable human being. She suffered. She didn't enjoy what she was doing. She didn't like the poor particularly. She was doing this out of a sense of duty.
Okay.
She expected a reward.
Like self-sacrifice.
Very much
like
a self-sacrifice.
Jesus Christ on the cross.
Yes.
Like sacrificing for
And she expected a reward, but she expected the reward in an afterlife, not in this life.
The metaphysical.
So she was an altruist. She sacrificed. She could have lived any other life. She came from a middle-class family in Europe. She could have done lots of different things. She was a smart woman. she chose to diminish her values, to eradicate her values and place other people as the top thing. And she didn't even help the poor, really. I mean, if you actually study what Mother Teresa did, she prevented them from dying.
Yeah,
but she believed that the meek shall inherit the earth. She believed that the greatest virtue was with the poor.
Right.
So she didn't encourage them to become middle class. She didn't encourage them to get a profession. She didn't encourage them to advance in life. She wanted them to stay poor. But God forbid they die. That was the sin. The sin was that they die and they stop suffering. Suffering was good in her view. But that
is... To get your way to heaven.
Yes. And
earn your way to heaven.
Everything Ayn Rand disagrees with. Everything Ayn Rand hates. And I have to say something about the Adam Smith relationship, right? So, but let me also say this. So I believe there are lots of altruists in the world out there. There are lots of people who they do what their mother tells them to do, right? Or they do what society expects them to do. To be self-interested in Ayn Rand's conception is to know what your values are, to really figure them out rationally. What will lead me to success, to flourish, to be happy, and then pursue them. Not listen to what other people tell you to do, but do what truly
you believe.
You believe and will make you happy. You think will make you happy. You can make mistakes, but you think will make me happy. And you see, this is, and you do it not to benefit society. You do it to benefit you. And yes, you could argue that if everybody is self-interested, society in some way, if you want to define it that way, is better off because all the individuals are better off. What is society ultimately, if not just a collection of individuals? But that's not the purpose. And this is the big difference with Adam Smith. Adam Smith doesn't like the idea of self-interest. He just identifies it as, yeah, the baker bakes the bread because it's in his self-interest, because he's trying to make a living. It's not particularly virtuous that he does it for that reason. What's virtuous is the effect. The effect is society is better off. So he's reversing what morality is. So it's an
empirical observation. It's just an empirical observation.
Ayn Rand, it's a normative statement.
Okay.
You should pursue...
A moral principle.
Moral principle. You should pursue your self-interest. Okay. It's not just okay. It's the essence of morality. And we all have been raised that morality equals altruism. So when you tell somebody self-interest is the essence of morality, they freak out because that's the opposite of everything they've been taught. Morality is about thinking of other people. Morality, even more important than altruism, morality is about being selfless, about self-denial. And Ayn Rand, that's what she's rejecting. She's saying, the whole purpose of life is to live. And if you're going to live, life means living well. And therefore, you need to pursue the values that will lead to a good life.
But the interesting thing is that most people, when they try to value the behavior of others, they will look at their intentions other than the outcomes. For instance, in the case of Mother Teresa, it was her intention to help the poor, even though she was not helping them in the Chinese sense of teaching the fishermen how to fish. She was basically not helping them get out of poverty. She was just helping them live day by day. While on the other hand, you may have someone with no intentions at all, but he creates a business, right? Say somewhere in the middle of Africa, right? Which desperately needs economic activity. He starts his own business. He starts employing people. He starts paying those people. Those people get money for a living. They are now more autonomous. They are now able to purchase a couple of stuff. I mean, of course, they're not great in life, but they're way better than they were before.
Way better.
But we will be judging that guy, or a lot of society will be judging that guy because he has a profit motive, right? And so it's about his intentions, not about the outcome, even though the outcome of all these people in the end may be way better to all of us, right? And to those individuals, than those that are very well intentioned. And that's also an interesting parallel with socialism as well, right? And with communism, because it's very well intentioned, but then in the end, the outcomes are terrible.
But it's not well intentioned, is Ayn Rand's point. Mother Teresa was not well intentioned. Socialism is not well intentioned. Communism is not well intentioned. Because the proper intention is the pursuit of your own well-being. That's the good intention. So the profit motive is good. The fact that the outcomes are positive Well, yeah, if your intentions are good, consistent with reality, consistent with your own well-being, the outcome will be good. So for Rand, the moral is the practical, and the practical is the moral. The fact is that good intentions will lead to good outcomes. And when you see socialism and you see the outcome, you have to start questioning the intentions. And the problem is we don't. That's why we keep going back to socialism over and over and over again. It fails every time. And we don't question it because the intentions are good.
Apparently.
She's saying, no, the intention is evil. And this is the point. Selflessness, which is what is behind socialism. It's not about helping people. It's about denying self. Selflessness, whether it's in the communist, the socialist form, or the fascist form, the nationalist form, any kind of collectivist is selfless.
All a bunch of collectivists.
Its selflessness always leads to bad outcomes. And where do you get good outcomes? When people pursue their own self-interest. When people pursue the profit motive. Not just in Central Africa. Why is America rich? Why has America become the richest, most powerful nation in the world? Because it left people free to pursue their own self-interest. And it celebrated that. It provided them with the legal framework to do that. It's called individual rights. The whole principle of, the government is there to protect you, but otherwise leave you free. Yeah. The idea that you have a right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, that principle allows people, morally allows them, to pursue their own self-interest. And so the United States was built on a moral code of self-interest versus socialism built on a moral code of selflessness. Self-interest the outcome will always be better. So, she agrees intentions matter. It's just that the whole world is motivated by the wrong intentions.
Yeah, you were talking about the American principles, and I was kind of having an offshoot in my mind of a different question to ask you. What would be Ayn Rand's view of John Locke, which is one philosophical father of the U.S.? But before we go into that, because it may get too philosophical, I wanted to still in here discussing the thing about altruism and selfishness. So we know Mother Teresa was an example that humans are capable of altruistic behavior.
Yes.
Now, when we look at nature, and I love to draw parallels with nature, I think that nature teaches a lot because we are the product of nature, sure, whether we like it or not. We see that there are two other species that also exhibit this altruistic behavior, right? We have ants and we have bees. Yeah. And the common thing about ants and bees is that they're all sisters. So it's all part of the big family. And when I think about it, would I self-sacrifice myself for the sake and for especially the life of my children? Absolutely. So within that realm, within the family realm, we can be deeply altruistic, right? Or not?
No. So I don't view it being a sacrifice for you to do a lot, including ultimately give up your life for your children. Your children are your value. It's a chosen value. This is why I think it's so important that we choose to have children, and not just have them out of a sense of duty or out of a sense of accident, right? It's important that we choose to have our children. And then the children become this immense value in our lives that we're willing to do almost anything for. But that's because you chose that value. It would be self-sacrificial not to help your children. It would be self-sacrificial not to work hard to give opportunities to your kid. It would be self-sacrificial for you not to go, and do what you can to benefit their lives, at least while they're still dependent on you.
So let me try wrapping that up. So that means that if I sacrifice myself for my children, that would be in my self-interest. In the sense that would make me happy.
But it's not a sacrifice. So we have to define our terms.
Okay.
Right? And it's important to define terms. What does sacrifice mean? Sacrifice means giving something up and expecting what in return? Nothing, or something less important. The whole point of sacrifice is pain. But if your children are your top value, then you're not sacrificing for them. So when I decide not to go to the movies because my child is sick, I'm giving up something less important, the movie, for something more important, my child. Mm-hmm. That's not a sacrifice. That's pursuing my values. My values. So it's not self-sacrifice when you give stuff up for your kids, and it's important that we use words right, because otherwise these terms get confused. So it's not altruistic, because altruism is sacrifice. When I do stuff for my children, because my children are very important to me. Now, if you don't like your children, as unfortunately some parents maybe don't, then I'd say what you're doing is you're fulfilling a contract. When you had kids, you sign up.
That's true.
You sign up.
It's like the social contract, right?
And but it's a real contract, because it's a choice you make.
It is.
And this is, again,
it's an active choice.
It's an active choice you make.
For most cases.
Yeah, and this is why I think, this is why I'm pro making that choice available.
Right.
Because I think having kids is so important. It consumes 18 years of your life.
It's true.
You better make that choice wisely. If you don't want to have kids, don't have them. So once you have the kids, even if you don't end up liking having kids, as some parents maybe discover that they don't, it's too bad. It's like signing a contract, and suddenly in the middle of the contract you go, I don't like this. Well, you got to fulfill the contract. It's so you got to put in the 18 years to live up to your responsibilities.
Okay, yeah, makes sense, and makes me wonder, or at least reconsider, at least some of the terms that we use. And yeah, I mean, it's not a sacrifice in the philosophical point of view. It would be somehow being up to my values, that I value my descendancy, my kids, and so that would be perfectly normal, not necessarily a sacrifice.
Absolutely. So all of life is about trade-offs. We're constantly trading off things.
Right.
We could do this or we could do that. If I'm trading off for the benefit of something that'll hurt me, that's worse for me, that's a sacrifice. If the trade-off is towards something that makes my life better, that is for higher value in my hierarchy of values, my relative value scheme, then it's a good thing. Then it's a positive. It's not a sacrifice.
Yeah, makes sense.
So sacrifice makes you worse off.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's move on to the most well-known book of Ayn Rand. It was the first book that I read from Ayn Rand, and it was a life changer for me. It kind of helped me construct the political conscience I now have. Not entirely, but it was definitely one moment that caused the difference, right? I have several of these moments that I can think about in retrospective, looking back in life, and identify these moments that define me as who I am. But this was definitely one of those moments. And I got to tell you the story of who recommended me the book and the moment I was living, because I think it's interesting in itself, as you will see. So first, I had a very small startup company. I just came back from the US. And we hired the design guy, and we knew someone in common. And that person in common, which actually shares my first name, he was one of the founders of the first private internet provider in Portugal. So there was a public internet provider, and this guy, on the back of an envelope, did some math, and he decided to create the first private internet provider. And the designer knew this guy, and he recommended Atlas Shrugged because he now became a maverick and all that. So it's very much like the type of characters that you can see here. Yeah. And he recommended to this guy, to João, the designer, this book. And we were kind of, getting to know each other, liking to discuss each other. We were finding a lot of commonalities, especially in political thinking. And he recommended me this book. And I respected his opinion and said, yeah, sure, I'm going to buy this book. And at the same time, in that startup company that I had, I was working with the guy. I had met him professionally in a professional setting, and we worked quite well professionally. But in the in the breaks, in the lunches, we started getting more personal and discovering each other's points of view politically. And he was a deep communist, in the sense that he had been part of the Communist Party that still exists here in Portugal. Yeah. And just to get you an idea of his points of view, he basically did not wear he didn't wear any new clothes coming from, because he didn't want to contribute to corporations such as Inditex, Zara, and all that. Yeah. He would purchase his clothes from the 70s, from the 80s. He wouldn't watch any movie whatsoever coming from Hollywood, from the US. Okay. He would only go to indie movie theaters. Yep. That's the kind of stuff he would consume. He did have an Achilles wheel. Apple. He loved Apple. He still loves. I think if he's watching this, I'm gonna send you some say hi, because it's been a while since I haven't seen him. But besides that Achilles heel, which is Apple, he tried to live by what he thought his principles. And just to give an idea of his political positions, I think one of the most moderate things he said was he would ban all private schools and universities, only public schools and universities. And one of the things he said that I'll never forget, because it really triggered me in the sense of, we need to do something about this, right? Somehow in the future, we need to stop people with these ideas from getting to power, because otherwise we're in deep trouble. We were discussing sexual assaults and, violence over women, especially rapes and all that. And he said in a very calm way. So it was not on the heat of the discussion, right? When sometimes you say something stupid. I mean, everybody does that. We're humans. No, he was very calm. And he said that he wouldn't mind having the state giving libido suppressors, so chemical castration basically, to men by default, just to avoid sexual rapes and sexual assaults. Yeah. And that scared me a lot because he was being serious about it, right? Yeah. He was thinking about the benefit of us all, in the sense, in this case of the women, right? Let's protect the women. Yep. And all means necessary, right? There's no boundaries. You can do whatever you want. And in this case, the state would basically administer in a forced way something to suppress your libido. Yeah. I mean, and I started reading this book at the very same time. Wow. So this was a big shock of ideas, because this was completely against that, right? And Atlas Shrugged it was interesting because I was getting different signals, right? Something that got deep into my under my skin. What he was saying was scaring me, and at the same time, a set of values that they reverberated within me, in the sense that these are the values, not all, but there's a lot of values that I stand for, right? Mm-hmm. And that defend us as individuals from people who have these insane ideas and that would use the state, right, against the individuals. Absolutely. Against the individual freedoms. So this was quite somehow a milestone in my life. It make a big difference, but at least for a while it overshot. And this is where the question is coming. Yeah. So this is this starts from a very rational point of view, right? Even all the characters, they're like synthetic characters, right? They don't have humane traits. Like those small flaws, like those emotions, right? When Danny Taggart, when she falls in love first with but then with Reardon, right? Yeah. And before Galt. Yeah. Sorry for blowing up the story and telling you all the details. So when she falls in love not spontaneously, right? Or in a serendipity way. She falls in love for what he achieves professionally and what he is as a very productive industrial guy, right? It's for...
I don't know. I think you read a different book than I did.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, doesn't she
fall in love the moment she opens her eyes and she sees John Galt's face?
Because she knows what he did, right?
But she doesn't really know what he did, right? She doesn't know. She doesn't. Yeah, I mean, the achievements are behind. I mean, behind in the background. But she opens his eyes and she says, here is a face that has known no pain, and there's a certain sequence. But the face represents values to her. It represents something. When the first scene she sees Reardon, she's going to fall in love with him. He's standing on top of the pile of the steel, and he's got this, pose and everything. Yeah. And she falls in love with who he is. And if you think about Reardon, right? Reardon is a deeply flawed character when we meet him for the first time, right? He has this relationship with his wife.
He's trying to find his way. He's trying to find his way,
He's trying to find his way. He has a relationship with his wife. He hates sex. He thinks sex is an animalistic thing. So he enjoys the sex itself, but he rationalizes it away, and he hates it. He gives this whole speech before he has sex with Dagny about how horrible sex is and animal, just after they've had sex. This was an animal instinct and everything. And she laughs at him. She thinks it's the funniest thing she's ever heard, right? and he gives money to his brother who's trying to destroy him. He has a weird relationship with his mother. They're all exploiting him. They're all taking advantage of him, and yet he succumbs to it. And throughout the novel, he changes. So he is the one character that actually changes throughout the novel.
Yeah, that's humane. Yeah.
And Dagny, if you think about Dagny, she is fighting something. She wants to achieve something. She, will give away a little bit, right? She meets John Galt. He explains his motives and everything that's going on to her, and she doesn't accept it. She goes back to the world when he's offering her not to go into the world. She goes back into the world, continues to fight against the person she loves, John Galt, right? And only at the end of the novel does she realize he was right and she was wrong. You remember this? There's a scene.
Yeah, but the way Reardon accepts it, right? That Danny just moves to her. I mean, moves on and parts ways and just starts with John Galt.
Do you think he?
It's also rational.
Yeah, but you don't think if she feels any pain? Excuse me. I mean, sure, but I mean, he feels pain. He's not happy about it, but he realizes that. Yeah.
Sorry about that. We can cut this from the.
I think he realizes, she's met somebody else. So he treats it rationally. He's not going to destroy his life over the fact that the woman he loves has walked away. And he realizes who Galt is and what he represents. So, there's so many scenes in the book that are opposite, right? Dagny gets on a train and there's a homeless person, a bum, right, on the train who's writing for free. And you'd expect Dagny's character to throw him off the train, right? And she buys him dinner. And she sits and talks to him. And she wants to understand, how did you get to the position that you had? There's so many of this, what you would consider human touch, right? I consider the human touch to be the rational. But there's so much of this, much more complexity about the characters. And much more in terms of her trying to figure stuff out. And she's not cold-hearted. She's doesn't care about human beings. She doesn't not.
No, that was not what I meant. I meant that they seem.
So they deal with the world in a rational way. So they're idealized in that sense. No, absolutely.
In retrospective, and I mean, this is one of the few books that I carried with me all the time. I know. Right? Yeah. This is 800 pages long, 1,000 pages long.
1,200 pages long.
I mean, this is huge. Yes. John Galt's speech, I'm going to spoil it, but it has over 70 pages, and it's a real anthem. It's quite amazing.
Yes.
I got absolutely thrilled with the speech. It's something that you don't forget. So don't get me wrong. This was a book that left a big mark on me. But
I don't think the characters are synthetic.
Now that I see in retrospective, I think that some of the characters were created to somehow embody some of her philosophical points of view.
Sure, right? Absolutely. I mean, her goal in her writing was to portray the ideal man. And an ideal woman, and Dagny is the ideal woman here, and John Galt's the ideal man, and Reardon is becoming an ideal man, and Francisco and D'Anconia and these other characters are ideal men in their own way, and yes, they're embodied her philosophical ideas, and she believes we should all embody philosophical ideas, that we should all be the embodiment of reason and rationality. That's the way to live, but. If you actually think about the characters in the detail of what they're going through, the struggles that they're going through, Galt desiring Dagny for years, he's watching her from afar, and he's in love with her, but he doesn't approach her because he's got this other goal that is more important, right? And he's keeping a distance. He's watching her, but he's not approaching her. The kind of restraint that takes. And the kind of emotional turmoil that involves. These are real human beings who are guided by reason. She's modeling what rationality means in human life. And it doesn't mean coldness. It doesn't mean unemotional. It just means the decision you make, a rational decision.
No, I didn't mean cold-hearted. It just sometimes it feels emotionless. And the reason why I'm asking this is because after reading the book, at least for, I would say, a couple of weeks or months, this somehow I somehow overshot in terms of the dichotomy between reason and emotions, right? For at least for a while, influenced definitely by the book, I thought that, the supreme value is definitely reason, and whatever you derive from reason in the Aristotelian way, right?
Sure.
Deductivist way, that whatever you derive from reason, and emotions are somehow subsidiary. More than that, they're kind of optional. At least that's how I experienced it, at least for a couple of weeks. And after a while, this phased out. And I realized that emotions, of course, are as important as reason. Perhaps not for driving your political motives, right? Not for driving your values. Your values should definitely be derived from reason, right? Not only from your hunch or your gut feelings. Like, I feel like doing this, and these are my values, right?
Reason should guide your life, but the reality is that we experience life emotionally. We live our emotions. And that's portrayed constantly in the book. The problem is, when the first time we read the book, we're super excited, and these are new ideas, and they're hitting us like a brick, and we don't pay attention to details. But think of, there's so many little details.
Let me give a teaser to our viewers, say.
There are scenes where Dagny is listening to music.
I wanted to
and Ayn Rand is describing the emotion she's feeling when she's listening to the music. And these are sweeping,
that's very emotional,
very emotional. Yeah. And she's not denying that. She's celebrating that.
So the teaser I want to give to our viewers is just saying that the book starts with the question, who is John Galt? And you only find out who John Galt is after like 700 pages long in the book.
It's a mystery story. That's why I don't want to give it away. I don't want to tell you who John Galt is.
It's definitely a great story.
So I read it when I was 16. Right, and
I was a little bit older.
So I was 16, and when I read it, I was a committed socialist.
Okay.
I was a committed collectivist. I was a committed nationalist, if you will. So to me, to me, it was a revolution. I fought the book. I argued with it. I did not want to accept it. I did not want to agree with her, and it took me months to read it. It took me a long time, because every passage contradicted everything I believed in.
That's very interesting. It's one of the fastest books I read in terms of per page.
So there are two types of people who read Atlas Shrugged.
I've carried the book with me all the times. Yes. I carry, trousers, right?
I know a lot of people who immersed themselves completely and read it very fast because they found their ideas in it. It's something that they held already deeply. They found resonance. For me, it was the opposite. I was fighting it. So it took me a long time to read. Okay. And by the time I finished it, she won, right? I was completely convinced. It made complete sense to me. I'd abandoned socialism and collectivism, and my Jewish nationalism and all of that were gone. And I was now completely dedicated to studying and learning everything I could about
because at
ideas.
That time, especially Israel, it was very, very socialist,
very socialist,
very prone to socialism, right?
Very nationalist.
The kibbutz are very like a communist thing, right?
Absolutely. They don't.
And nationalists.
And very nationalist.
Golda Meir, she was both a socialist and a nationalist.
We grew up. I grew up with just waiting for that grenade I could jump on, right? To save my fellow man, right? That was every song. Every story, everything we studied in school was.
But that was instilled, right? That was part
of very much instilled. Zionism, and this helped me reject all that and move on and focus my life.
Follow your own path.
Exactly.
So that's interesting. So we were somehow contrasting people and politicians as well, that are more rational in the sense of they derive their values, their set of principles, and then they act based on that set of principles, and they defend those principles. I think that people in general, they appreciate that. They appreciate people or politicians that stand for something, and they know they stand for something, and they fight for those values. And then on the other hand, you have people that are, they make politics based on gut feelings, on hunches, on whatever they feel it's necessary or should be done. So it's interesting because when we look at Donald Trump, right, he embodies a little bit of this kind of emotional politician that knows how to play with emotions in a very, very clever way. He's quite good at it. He knows how to to run emotions on people, right? It's like mass psychology. He knows these things, but then he doesn't stick to a set of values, of principles. We don't know what Trump stands for. What we know is that he defends tariffs. He thinks that the world is a zero-sum game, as we were discussing before the podcast started. And he basically makes his decisions, at least from my perspective, he makes his decisions based on his hunches, his gut feelings. So he doesn't radicate from a set of ideas, right? But it's interesting because you have a lot of smart people standing for him, right, and supporting him, that then try to rationalize what Trump does, right? Because it prima facie, I think he is what he seems to be, right? Oh, he seems to be like a guy that acts according to his emotions, and he's very oriented by that. Absolutely. But then you have very smart people trying to rationalize what he does.
Well, how smart they are is debatable, I think, given the attempt to rationalize him. But look, the reality is that successful politicians are not principled. Over the last 50 years, the most successful politicians have been the ones that are good at manipulating their audience's emotions. And Donald Trump is a master at it. And now, look, partially it's because the American people got to a point, for a variety of reasons, if you want, we can talk about, that where they wanted a Donald Trump, right? I mean, he fulfilled what the American public desired. And they desired somebody who was thuggish, who was emotional, and who drove them by fear.
Let me add a follow-up question there. Don't follow your train of thought, but wasn't that perhaps a reaction to the overshoot or to the excesses of the left wing that became ever more identitarian, ever more woke, in the sense that they left the traditional socioeconomic class struggle, right? And they focused on minorities and on identitarian causes, which was something that only the far right would do, right? And they brought that to their arena, to their political arena. Could Trump also be a reaction to that? People were tired of all the excesses brought by the wokeism and cancellations and all that?
No question that's true, but they were also tired of everything else. That is, if you think about the American, yes, there's a huge reaction against woke. And that happened in 16 when he was first elected, and of course it happened, I think, in 24 when he was elected for a second time. The American people resent the kind of the ideology of the far left, and the ideology of far left was becoming culturally dominant. But it's also an abandonment. It represents an abandonment of the principles that made America great and made America significant. And it was I think America became tired and fearful of what was going on in its world. 9/11 gave the Americans a sense that we're much weaker than we thought we were. We can't win a war in Afghanistan. We can't win a war in Iraq. And our politicians lie to us, right? It's obvious who did 9/11, and they're lying to us about it, right? George Bush can stand up in front of Congress right after 9/11 and tell us that Islam is a religion of peace. Nobody believed him, right? He's lying clearly. And yet, these are politicians leading us into a war with this idea. What's going on here? Full of conflicts, full of contradictions, and we can't win. And then the financial crisis happens. And we're told by George Bush again, and by pretty much everybody, that this was a failure of capitalism. Really? I mean, did we really have capitalism a year before the financial crisis and then it failed? I mean, that's ludicrous to say that it's a failure of capitalism. It's a failure of something. We can talk about what it was.
A lot of things.
Of regulations and the Federal Reserve and controls and all of that. But it's not a failure of markets and it's not a failure of capitalism. And yet Americans were told that and they believed it. So our economic system is not working. Our military is not working. Our foreign policy is not working. Our politicians only lie to us. They bail out all the banks, and they don't bail out the individuals who are losing their homes. They to hell with them, but the bankers all get bailed out. Americans feel betrayed by the political class. They're betrayed by their intellectuals. They're betrayed by the ideas. But by the time
they lean to the left, right?
So they lean a little to the left. They lean a little to the left with Obama. But if you think about the Tea Party, is a rebellion already against that. And the Tea Party is trying to resurrect the founding. So the Tea Party is like the Constitution and the founding and less government, but they don't understand any of that.
It's based on principles.
It's not based on principles. They kind of have an emotion that connects them to founding fathers, but they don't understand the concept of individual rights. They don't understand the concept of limited government. So there was a sign, a famous sign in the Tea Party, keep your hands off of my Medicare. Right? Wait a minute. You want limited government, but you want government-provided health care at the same time?
I imagine libertarians would be upset with that.
So right next to a sign saying, Atlas Shrugged or something like that, Ayn Rand was right, or things like that, you get keep my hands off of my Medicare, right? So the Tea Party is this conflicted but emotional response. And then Donald Trump comes and says to the Tea Party, you're absolutely right. This country's gone off the rail. And you, Americans, you're the good guys. Everything that you stand for is good and true and wonderful. So the problems are not you.
What the outside enemy, the external enemy, the other countries.
It's the other, right? So
the immigrants as well.
So he says, first, life really sucks in America, right? Carnage in the streets of America. He says this in 2016, the safest year pretty much on record in terms of murder and violent crime in America. But he portrays it as dark, right? Violence everywhere, the carnage in the streets of America. Nobody has jobs. Unemployment is very, very low, but nobody has jobs. Everything's gone to China. So the Chinese are the bad guys, the immigrants are the bad guys, and the elites, the leftists.
Yeah, exactly.
The woke,
the journalists,
they're the bad guys.
The media.
So life sucks. Life is horrible. America's falling apart. Those founding principles, they're gone, right? And it's all the other's fault, right? Traditionally, authoritarians have always blamed the other. And here the other, in Europe, it was always the Jew. Mm-hmm. Here the other is the Chinese or the Mexican or the elites. And what's the solution?
In Europe, nowadays, those who pick up with the Jews are the left-wingers, yes. Usually.
Yeah, so the solution is, trust me. Not principles. Not the founding of America, not the founding principles of America, not individual rights, not anything like that. Trust me.
Yeah.
And all those Tea Partiers who were like big on the founders and they completely gravitated towards Donald Trump because he
quite impressive,
fed
right?
on their fear. He fed on that
because the
fear.
Founding fathers were men of principle,
Absolutely.
right? When you look at Jefferson, John Adams,
Absolutely.
I mean, all those people, Washington, they were men of principle.
Yes.
And
they looked at government through the lens of principle, and
they were very rational as well.
Absolutely.
They knew that they need to draw clear boundaries in terms of federal power. Otherwise, their claws would basically smash the states and their individual freedoms of the citizens as well. And then you look at Trump, and what are his principles? We don't know, right? But he still resonates with a lot of people, and the GOP got completely captured
because the Tea Party never understood the Founding Fathers. It never understood those principles, never really believed in those principles. They had an emotional attachment to the idea of American greatness, the idea of the founding, but they never understood what the principles were. They didn't understand limited government and individual rights. So when Donald Trump comes and he confirms their fears,
yeah,
and he's clear about who the enemy is.
Yeah, and that resonates with the electorate.
That resonated with them. And then he said, I can solve your problems. Look, I build buildings. I can solve these problems. I know how to solve problems. They gravitate towards him. And the fact that he is, by nature, an authoritarian, by nature, he has no interest in limited government.
Yeah, absolutely.
If he could, he'd do way
more than he's doing.
He would like to just do whatever he wants to do. They don't care because they are so afraid. They're so scared about what's going on in the world. They're so angry about the lying and the deception and the failures of America over the last 30 years that they're willing today to give power to one individual to clean it up. Now, when he actually goes around cleaning it up, he's not very popular. Like his immigration policy today is not popular in America. His tariffs are not popular in America. But they still like him because he still stands.
And the way he frames
firm.
things, right? It's the way he frames the narrative he creates. He's protecting American jobs.
Exactly.
It's bollocks.
It's
Bullshit.
complete
Let's call it
bollocks.
what it is.
It's complete bullshit.
But people go for it.
Yes.
Right? Because again, it's the emotions driving, and a lot of people don't have the economic knowledge to understand that in most cases that will just drive prices up. That will be bad for American consumers, and everybody will be worse off.
Absolutely.
And still the narrative he pursues kind of works, right? And it's interesting to see that here in Portugal, the more far right party is trying to they're experimenting with the same thing, trying to take the same train, follow along, and
you
say that he
protects
say
all over Europe,
the farmers, that he protects the farmers against the imports and all that, and he doesn't. But somehow it's easy to.
But we live in a culture that has rejected reason, that's rejected rationality, that feels betrayed. They really do feel betrayed, and that is looking for solutions. And the solution is going to be emotional. It's not going to be thought out. It's not going to be principled, and it's not going to be based on science. It's not going to be based on economics. It's going to be based on what appeals to that emotion. And that's how we've trained people. That's our educational system emphasizes emotion. Our morality, we talked about this at the beginning. Our morality is focused on emotion. Everything in our life is focused on emotion, and all the politician is doing is exploiting that and taking advantage of that. And we live in a mixed economy, like everywhere in the world today, or most places in the world, have a mixed economy. We have elements of freedom and capitalism and elements of statism and socialism. And this mixed economy is unstable, and it creates a lot of losers, a lot of people who feel frustrated by it. And what everybody blames the problems on is the element of freedom and the element of capitalism. So now the competition in politics is who can frame the statist and collectivistic attitude, in the most emotionalistic, strongest. Everybody's against capitalism. Everybody's against freedom.
But you think it's the economic questions are driving the political debate nowadays? Because looking at the last couple of years, I think there was a huge cultural battle, right? And that cultural battle was basically driven by the more extreme left-wingers, right? And the identitarian...
There's a backlash against that.
The identitarianism that they created. But the thing is, and it's interesting to see that in the U.S., all over the place, but especially in the U.S., libertarians and nationalists, they form like a big coalition to wage a war against this cultural battle. But I mean, they're completely different, right? They're nothing alike.
Yeah,
because the libertarian believes in individual, the nationalist believes in the state over the individual.
But it might be that the modern libertarians don't believe in an individual, so
or
we
that
have to
could
be suspicious
okay.
of that. So I'm suspicious of the libertarians who are
siding too much with Trump.
Joining with the nationalists, because
we have some of them here in Portugal as well.
I suspect that those people are not true individualists. They're collectivists. They're a form of collectivists. I think anarchists generally are collectivists.
By the way, I predict that whenever they see this episode, they're gonna insult me a lot.
Oh yeah, and they're already insulting me. Most of them know who I am, and they hate me already. But look, most anarchists or anarchism is a collectivistic ideology at the end of the day, so it doesn't surprise me that they turn into nationalists and anti-immigration. How can an anarchist be anti-immigration? It's if you think that anarchy is individualistic, it's not. It's fundamentally collectivist. So, look, I think that fundamentally, if you look at all these political parties of the right, they were all statists. They were all anti-capitalist, every single one of them. So something economically is going on. It's not just the cultural issues. There's an underlying economic aspect to this. And it's that economic aspect is being driven by the frustration of certain people about economic prosperity. They know we could be a lot richer, and we're not. They hate inequality, right? A lot of this started with Piketty and the inequality. A lot of it started with the financial crisis. The financial crisis was a real pivot.
It was a trigger, yeah, definitely.
It was a real trigger. And it was a trigger towards the left, but then the left betrayed them culturally. But now they're looking for a political party that culturally is aligned with them and economically is statist. And that's the new right. The new right is statist on economics and conservative, traditionalists on the cultural issues. And that is the combination that people feel safest with. because it's the least individualistic, right? What's part of what scares people about woke, and I don't think this is individualism, but this is how they view it, is, oh my God, if people can choose their own sex, people can choose to be trans or whatever, that scares the bejesus out of them, because that means individuals can choose stuff. Individuals have autonomy now over their own body. So they reject everything about the individual. They reject everything about individualism. And what you get is collectivism in everything. You get collectivism in politics, and you get collectivism, traditionalism in individual choices. So they want traditionalism all the way
I was
through.
not approaching wokeism from that point of view, in the sense that, I mean, if you're an individual, you were born a man and you decide to live as a woman, it's up to you. I mean,
yeah, I think there's something. I think there's something wrong
for the others,
right?
but it's up to you. I mean,
sure.
I mean, no one has anything to do with that.
Politically, there's no issue, but
I was approaching it from the cancellation perspective, right? I don't like what you say; it offends me, so you shouldn't be able to say it, right? Using the state apparatus to limit your freedom of speech,
but I think
for
that's
instance,
overrated.
Right?
I think in America, I think they're much more offended by the trans than they are offended by cancel culture. The right is just as good at cancel culture as the left.
No, yeah, that's the point. That's my point.
And look, I'm not against.
That's where I was heading next.
And I'm not really against cancel culture, right? I always say, if you're a communist, this maybe relates to your friend, you're not invited to my house. I'm canceling you. Now, I can't cancel you politically. You have free speech, but I'm not interested in working with a communist. I'm not interested in hanging out with a communist. Communism is an evil ideology that has the blood of tens of millions of people on it. And if you still believe in this ideology after Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot and all these other, I don't like you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Go away, right? So, and I have no tolerance for Nazis. I have no tolerance for communists. So, the idea of canceling somebody is not a negative. I actually respect somebody who says, you know what? Your ideology is so offensive to me, I'm firing you from my company. That makes complete sense to me.
But what happens is a little bit different, right?
So what I think offended people is not cancel
you don't
culture.
let someone be invited to a university, which is a space of plurality, where you should be able to listen to all kinds of perspectives.
But if that person,
that has an impact.
But if that person is a Nazi,
you're limiting my freedom.
If the person is a Nazi, should we invite him onto campus to speak about his Nazism?
Yeah, well...
so there are limits.
Well, here it's interesting because here in Portugal it's not forbidden. I mean, Mein Kampf, you can buy it on the bookstores.
I don't believe it should be forbidden. But again, if I own a university which is pluralistic and a diversity of ideas, are there ideas that I would exclude from my university? Yeah, there's certain ideas I don't want to present. Am I going to bring the latest? Deepak Chopra, is he invited to my university to come and speak? No. He's not.
Well, yeah, but you also had people that were kind of moderate, standing in the middle, right?
Yes, but the whole point about cancel culture is, look, that the standards that they were using were wrong. It's not that you have standards. Every institution should have standards. My difficulty with cancel culture was that the standards, they were excluding ideas that were rational. They were excluding ideas that were within the mainstream, that were reasonable. They weren't excluding the crazy stuff. So here were communists who have blood on their hands, in my view, excluding, I don't know, a regular conservative. That's
conservatives from universities as well.
That to me is...
Or comedians, right? They wanted to suppress comedians, like Dave Chappelle and all that.
I agree. So that was offensive. But I think what really swayed America is not cancel culture. What really swayed them, sadly, is, and you see this, why do they like Putin? They love Putin. Why do they like
the
Putin?
General American...
The right in America.
Oh, the right in America.
Right in America loves Putin.
Because he's the resemblance of the strong guy, right?
And he hates LGBTQ+, or whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, he hates the fact that he hates individualism. He's a real collectivist. He's for the Russian identity,
That's
Russian
the Russian
spirit,
tradition. That's the Russian tradition. It's not individualistic.
Exactly. So what really offends them about woke is what they identify as a semblance of individualism. Now, it's non-individualistic. Woke is completely emotionalistic and non-individualistic. But they're offended by the wrong thing. They're not offended by the emotion.
It's actually collectivist, right? Because you think in terms of minorities, right?
Absolutely,
it's the blacks, it's the gays, and all that, and you treat everybody the same way.
But notice how the right identifies woke. So a lot of the people on the right say that woke is a consequence of Thomas Jefferson. They say yes.
Really?
They say woke is
Thomas Jefferson.
Yes, woke is the ultimate expression of the Enlightenment. Woke is the ultimate expression of liberalism. Liberalism in the classical liberalism.
Progressive. Yeah.
Because what is the problem with Jefferson and what's the problem with the Enlightenment? They're too individualistic. And that's what offends the right. The right is anti-founding fathers. The right is anti-Enlightenment. They hate the Enlightenment.
Yeah,
because
I know
the Enlightenment
that.
is individualistic. Thomas Jefferson is individualistic.
And parts way with religion as well.
They think that woke is individualistic. They're wrong. We understand it's completely collectivistic. We understand that woke and the new right are very similar to one another.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you next, because at least in Portugal we can see it, and I think in the West it's happening the same. I'd love to have your thoughts on this. It seems like there's now like a right woke movement that's being created that resembles a lot the left woke movement. They are all about canceling if it's for their own motivations, whatever they are, right? And so they are creating a very similar trends and political movement. And of course, that for collectivists, for these far-right nationalists, we know that they would be totally fine with using the apparatus of the state, the force of the state, to impose their own thoughts and political thoughts on people, right? And so the question is, how do we now wage a war on that as well? Because we will go from one really bad thing to another really bad thing. So it goes from left to right, but in the end, it's the same.
It's all collectivism.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, cancel culture's always existed. I keep coming back to this. I was banned by Fox because I was anti-Trump, right, in 2016. Yeah. Right? Is that not cancel culture? I'm supposedly with them on economic issues and a lot of these things. Some of the people at Fox really like me, but I was literally banned by Fox
News.
News.
A private entity. They decide whether to invite one or not.
Cancel culture has often been by private entities, right? So, look, the right has always been, the far right has always been collectivist, right? Fascism and communism are twins. Yeah. The two sides of the same collectivistic coin. One is for the sake of the nation and for the sake of the race, and the other is for the sake of the proletarian or something like that, right? But they're both rejections of individualism. So how do we fight them? We fight them on the basis of the fundamental ideas. So they're both collectivistic. What we need to fight is collectivism. What makes us different is we're individualists. We need to fight for individualism. I think what liberal parties, the mistake liberal parties, and again I mean liberal in the European sense, not the American sense, the mistake liberal parties make is that they're not willing to fight for individualism. They're not willing to go all out. This battle is about individual rights. It's about the individual liberty. It's about freedom. It's about not, allowing individuals to live their lives based on their own principles, using their own minds, free of coercion, free of force. That's what rights mean. It means the ability to live that life without the authority of the state imposing itself on you. I don't care if the state is left or the state is right or the state is the middle. What I don't want is them imposing their values on me. I want to be able to live my life. That's the essence of freedom. That's the essence of a liberal ideology. And that I think we've lost. And we seem timid. Too many people are timid to defend the individual, not just to debate this or that particular political issue. And to attack collectivism, it's not about the common good. It's not about the public interest. It's not about the state and the nation. It's about the well-being of the individual. And that's the political battle we need to fight. And that's the Founding Fathers, right? Yeah. The Founding Fathers, the Declaration of Independence is all men are created equal as individuals, and they all have an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the founding document of a properly liberal society.
Can I add on? You often describe individual rights as the moral foundation of a free society. For someone who hasn't thought deeply about it, What exactly are individual rights? Where do they come from? And why do they matter? And I think here in Portugal, we liberals, in the European sense, we need a word from you.
Look, I think what the Enlightenment understood, what people in the Enlightenment understood, is the unit in society, the political unit in morality is the individual. What the value is the individual. And then the question is, and that the individual, the other thing the Enlightenment understood, is that the individual thrives when he can use his mind to pursue his life. And then the question is, what does the human mind require? What kind of society allows the individual to thrive within it and to use his mind to develop himself and to make himself what he is? And the Enlightenment, look, the Enlightenment is an era just after the religious wars. It's an era in which you're still persecuted for your ideas, right? I mean, Voltaire has to escape to Geneva. Diderot sits in jail because he's an atheist. Even John Locke has to escape England for a little while to Amsterdam to feel free. And books are still being banned. So the idea is you have to liberate the human mind. And you have to allow people to act on their own, for their own values and their, to pursue their own dreams. And really the concept of individual rights is a concept trying to bridge the idea of the individual living for his own values and using his own mind and the efficacy of reason with the idea that the enemy of that is force. And then how do we create a political system that allows that? How do we create a political system that allows individuals to pursue their own dreams, to pursue their own life based on the reason? Individual rights bridges that idea in morality with the idea of politics. And it says the government's only job is to protect your freedom. The government's only job is to protect your freedom to act on your own behalf. And as long as you're not harming other people and, you're pursuing your life, you're pursuing your ideas, you're using your mind in a rational way, as long as you're not hurting other people, the state has no business interfering in your life. It's going to leave you free. So it's the negation of force. It's the eradication of force from human society. That's the job of government. Government always has been the number one violator of our rights, the number one infringer on our freedom and on our liberties. Now the idea is that government is the protector of those rights. Mm-hmm. And that's the revolution that is John Locke, to come back to your question about John Locke. And that's the revolution of the Enlightenment, and that's a Declaration of Independence in the American Constitution, is how do we protect the rights of the individual? Basically to live free, based on his own values, and to make mistakes, right? And to suffer the consequences, so they can learn from those mistakes. Instead of the government acting as a paternalistic mother, dictating what we can and cannot do, the government needs to step away and protect us from criminals and fraudsters, and other than that, leave us free to engage with one another as we see fit.
Okay, so Yaron, this has been a 1 hour long discussion. It's been great. I do have one closing question that kind of follows up on what you just said, because we're clearly parting ways from the values of the Enlightenment, right?
Yes, very much so.
And that is definitely a bad thing. Not only the left, but also the populist right that has been gaining momentum all over the world, especially in the Western countries, in the US, but also here in Europe. And so I already asked you what kind of war can we wage somehow, going back to these deeply rational values from the Enlightenment, where facts matter, where science matter, right? And we don't go back to obscurantism, which is actually happening. So the question I have to ask is, what should we do? Should we retreat like Gault, or should we fight like Prometheus?
Well, I would say that first of all, there's no way to retreat to. So there's
that's a good point.
Retreat is not that simple or easy, but no, this is the time to fight, and I think Ayn Rand is giving us more tools to be able to articulate that fight and to make that fight real. And I encourage everybody to be reading Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead and some of Ayn Rand's nonfiction literature. But we need to speak up. We need to get engaged. We need, to the extent that political activism is possible, and people interested in politics, they should engage politically. But we need the main thing that we can all do is speak and talk about these ideas and reject the populism of both left and right, reject the collectivism in our society, and fight for individualism. Speak up for the individual and for his right to his own life and to live his life based on his own values. That's the essence. If we can get those ideas from the Enlightenment back into our culture, respect for reason and science and facts and the individual, the politics will take care of themselves in a sense.
That's a great way of ending this. But actually, I do have one other, it's not closing question, just a curiosity, because I was looking at the cover of Ayn Rand. And when I think about her books and her philosophy, I don't know why, I associate that a lot. I do somehow a connection with Art Deco. Is there any relationship with this architectural movement, Art Deco and Ayn Rand? I don't know why when I go through, even in the case of Fountainhead's a little bit different, because it's the other ones that care. It's the socialist government that cares about all the ornamentation and all the decor of the buildings. But I don't know why. It's just a curiosity. If there's any connection.
Well, first I'd say, Ayn Rand had a whole theory of aesthetics. So she was very much.
She was deeply fond of aesthetics.
Philosophically, she developed a whole theory about aesthetics. I don't think her favorite was Art Deco. She was a romantic. And she favored romantic art more broadly. She liked Art Deco, in terms of decoration and stuff. But in architecture, she was a modernist. So her favorite architect was Frank Lloyd Wright, and she favored kind of that modern style of architecture. Not what it evolved into as just blocks of glass, but kind of the beauty of Frank Lloyd Wright building. And if people look up Frank Lloyd Wright, they'll see.
And I imagine she would despise the post-structuralists and the postmodernists.
Yeah, she'd very much, I think, despise. Look, I think there's a lot of good architecture today. I think the one area in art that's not too bad is architecture, where you do find some pretty spectacular skyscrapers and pretty amazing private homes that are quite beautiful. So I don't think she was. So I think there's something about Art Deco that she liked, and there's certain pieces of furniture and pieces of decorative art that she had in her home. But in terms of art, painting, sculpture, she was definitely, I think, much more of what she called a romantic realist.
Okay, great. Yaron, thank you very much once again for being here with us today.
Absolutely. This was fun.
For your time, was great talking to you. Espero que toda a gente tenha gostado também. Abraço, até uma próxima. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was it.
Great.
It was a great talk. Had loads of fun.
Yeah, this is good. Yeah, could easily go 3 hours.
No, absolutely. But otherwise, we would probably scare away our audience.